Hey folks, Dusty here. This is one of the videos for my series on financial planning for the homestead. Today we're going to take a deep dive into the financial considerations regarding broilers or meat chickens. For this example, we're going to use a 100 chick base, so you can easily adjust the numbers up or down to suit your bird quantities. What I've done is create a series of spreadsheets that show the costs associated with raising 100 Cornish cross birds from hatching to 7 weeks of age. I included the cost of the birds, shipping, feed costs, and processing costs. Now these numbers are just examples and will vary based on your hatchery, the time of year, shipping or pickup options, availability, type of feed choice, and processing costs. Even if you're processing them yourself, you will still want to include an estimated cost for supplies like bags and other materials. Your time and any help that you may pay for should be considered as well. You may find out that your feed consumption costs are perhaps 15 to 20% lower if your birds are pasture raised too. Once we get into the charts, you'll see that each chart increases the quantity of birds in 100 bird units. The first chart has 100 birds, the second chart 200, the third 400 birds, and the fourth chart I bumped up to my planned max for next season, 1,100 birds. For my 1,100 bird season, I staggered the batches across a 17-week period that I have slated for broilers. But you could run as many batches as you like concurrently, and it will not affect the overall cost, although it will affect the running balances in your broiler fund. In this chart, using my 17-week window and raising each batch to 7 weeks, I could run a total of 1,900 birds, but I would need more brooder boxes and tractors. Of course, each batch could be larger or smaller as your experience, brooder space, pasture size, and resources dictate. Keep in mind, too, that some broiler farms will finish their birds at anywhere from 5 to 9 weeks, which will greatly affect their finished weight and, of course, affect your feed costs, overall production costs, and the money generated from the birds as well. One advantage to finishing the birds earlier would be to free up pasture space if you have limited suitable area for use for their tractors. Cornish cross broilers are bred for fast growth, and along with that comes an increased stress on the birds' hearts. The most common cause of broiler mortality comes in the form of heart attacks, as the birds pack on the pounds so quickly. To reduce the risk of heart failure, most hatcheries recommend that you finish them in the 7 to 9 week range. Keep these factors in mind when planning your time schedule based on feed consumption, available pasture, and overall bird health and mortality rates. By staggering the batches and keeping each batch at 100 birds, I can keep smaller brooders and smaller tractors, as well as fewer brooders and fewer tractors. By using smaller brooders, I can rotate new birds in each week, and as the birds grow, the brooder or tractor size increases. In the top graph, I show the first batch of 100 being delivered on week 1. Each color represents a different brooder box or tractor size and location for my planning purposes to show the staggered use of the brooder boxes and tractors. The first 3 boxes in the color graph are the brooder boxes, and the next 2 are tractor size 1 and tractor size 2. Everything to the right of the black divisor line is outdoor tractors on pasture. You'll see in the following charts how the stagger works as I add additional batches. For the purpose of this video, we're going to focus on the numbers, but I wanted to bring attention to the color graph as it correlates to the varying feed costs as the birds grow. In this first chart, there's a lot of empty spaces because I use the same chart as we add additional batches going forward. Okay, so let's dive into the numbers. Week 1, we have our bird purchase. Keep in mind that this will likely need to be paid for when you order your chicks, but that will depend on your hatchery. I separated out the shipping cost as this may be an expense that you can write off differently, which can affect your bottom line. Always check with your accountant, but by keeping it separate, it will allow them to categorize it correctly and make it easier for them. In my case, I am looking into 2 hatcheries, one local and one not. I've personally visited the out-of-state hatchery, and I've had good luck with them. And I have no experience with the local one. I have compared prices from both hatcheries, and even with the added shipping cost, the overall batch cost is the same. There are some advantages to going with local hatcheries, including not having delays in shipping or receiving stressed birds, but either way, the overall cost is the same. The next entry down is my estimated feed cost for the first batch for the first week. This is the local cost for the amount of feed the hatchery estimates for 100 birds. As we scroll down, we see a subtotal for stock cost, shipping, and feed. We'll come back to these lower rows in a bit. Week 2 shows no cost for stock or shipping as we are only dealing with one batch in this example. You will see that as the birds grow, so does their appetite. So you will need to plan for that along the way. Weeks 3 through 6 are all the same, except for the increasing feed costs. When we get to week 7, we will also need to calculate the processing cost. If you are selling your birds live, you may not need to account for that. If you are processing yourself, your out-of-pocket costs may be less than a paid processor will be as well. Keep in mind, it's always best to assume the cost will be higher than what you actually anticipate it to be. In my example, I include a $2 processing fee per bird, and you can see that I base it on a 0% mortality rate. After processing, I show an estimated income of $1,800. Of course, this will vary based on mortality, price per pound, how you market the birds, whole or cut, whether they are sold to a wholesaler or they are retail, certified organic, non-GMO, etc., and your local market conditions. If you don't sell all your birds at one time, you will need to plan accordingly because this money won't come in all at once. So now let's tally things up. We'll drop down to the next row, net. This tallies up each week's respective costs and includes income from the sale of the birds. The following row shows balance. This is your broiler fund balance if we assume you start at 0. Each week you will be in the red, below 0, or overdrawn until you sell your stock off. It isn't until week 7 that you officially go in the black or show a positive balance. From an accounting perspective, this would be our Black Friday. In accounting terms, when you're in the red, you're in the negative, and when you're in the black, you're in the positive. The term Black Friday is when a business crosses over their break-even point and starts realizing a profit each year. This is a very important thing to understand because you need to ensure that you can cover all of your costs for the full course of the 7 weeks. You cannot run out of food at week 5 and not have any money. If so, you may have to process early. And if you have to process early with no money, that can be a little more challenging. If you have to process early, then your birds are going to be smaller than you were originally planning. If you have customers expecting a 4+ pound bird and deliver them a 2-pound bird, they may not want to deal with you in the future. The balance row shows how quickly those expenses add up. In the last column, we add in our income and it offsets our costs. Or you could say that our costs offset our income, because that's how it will feel. You may have $1,800 in your pocket, but once you factor in expenses, your net income is only $668. Later on, we'll take a closer look at breaking those numbers down. But now that we have a good understanding of how the chart works, let's look at adding additional batches into the mix. This example is identical, other than adding a second batch. In this case, I separated the batches by 3 weeks, but that's not necessary. This is to allow my pasture some time to recover before the next batch rolls through. The end results will be the same regardless. The only differences will be how the expenses will accrue along the way and what your broiler fund looks like. You can also see here that I added one more row at the bottom. We'll talk about this one a little later. We can see here that all of the costs and income I used are the same for both batches. Everything tallies up at the far right side in the row marked balance, showing a net income of $1,336 for the season. Moving on to our third chart, we now run 4 batches, separated by 2 weeks each, over a 13-week period. If we look at the color chart, we are staggering our brooders and tractors, so we only need one of each size. Again, the main costs and profit are identical per batch, but now we're getting into a larger investment. In my case, the birds stay in the first tractor for weeks 4 and 5, and then switch to the larger tractor for weeks 6 and 7. As you can see, the numbers begin to climb pretty quickly, and we don't see a positive balance in our broiler fund until week 9, which is after our first 2 batches are processed and sold. That means we are only operating in the black for the last 4 weeks of the season. At the end of the 13 weeks, our net profit is double what it was for the 2 batches. It went from $13.36 to $26.72 because all the numbers stayed the same. And when we look at this last page showing 11 batches over 17 weeks, you'll see how important that financial planning becomes. Starting at the top, each batch is separated by 1 week, again allowing the brooders and tractors to be staggered. At this point, I will need 2 of each of the tractors, but only 1 of each of the brooders, because each batch will be in the same tractor for weeks 4 and 5, and the larger tractor for weeks 6 and 7. This is a pretty intense plan, as we are taking delivery of 1 batch every week for 11 weeks. Then, on week 7, processing begins and continues every week through week 17. During weeks 7 through 11, we will both be bringing in a new batch every week and processing a batch every week. During these 5 weeks, 100 new birds come in, 300 move into a larger brooder or tractor, 200 remain in their tractor from the previous week, and 100 are processed. During these 5 weeks, we have 700 birds on site at all times, making this the busiest part of the season for us. Again, all costs and income are the same as before. Each batch brings in the same revenue as in the previous examples. Since we've already seen how all the numbers work, we'll just take a quick walk through for this example of 1,100 birds over 17 weeks. If we zoom in to the first 7 weeks, we can see 7 individual stock costs, 7 individual freight costs, and the progression of feed costs over the 7 different batches of birds as they grow. Take a quick look at the balance at the end of week 6. Yes, that is over $3,000 in the hole, and we still have to pay for the processing of the first batch of birds before we can get any income. Once the processing begins, we still have 5 weeks before our investment starts to pay off, and even then, we only have $305 in profit. From this point on, we are no longer bringing in any new batches of birds, so every week our numbers will decrease by 100 until the end of the season. Our most expensive weeks are weeks 7 through 11, with an expense totaling $1,132 per week. In the end, we show a nice profit of $7,348 over the 17-week period. But remember, the first 10 weeks of that, we were in the red the entire time. Well, hopefully this video helped answer some questions you may have had about raising broilers. Whether you plan on raising them for personal use or for sale, it's important to understand the costs associated so you know what to expect. As I mentioned, this chart system can be adjusted as needed to suit your homestead size, bird quantities, and costs. And it doesn't need to be this complex. I hope I've done a good job presenting and explaining for you. If you have any questions at all or suggestions on how I can improve my charts, or if there's any other charts you may want to see, please let me know in the comments. That's all for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. As always, take the trip and enjoy the ride.